I always thought that even the most dysfunctional families showed up for weddings. No matter how messy things got, no matter how many years of silent treatment, backhanded comments, or snide whispers behind your back, there was something about a wedding that made people put on nice clothes, sit through a ceremony, and smile for the camera. I held on to that belief right up until the moment I walked down the aisle and realized half the pews were filled with strangers, not friends, not family, just coworkers of my husband's and distant acquaintances who probably came for the open bar. But the seats reserved for my family? Empty. My name is Olivia Hart, and on what should have been the happiest day of my life, I stood at the altar in a white lace gown, one I had carefully picked out and paid for myself, facing the man I loved, while pretending not to look at the cold, untouched chairs behind him. I clutched Marcus's hands tighter than I should have. He noticed, gave me that small, steady smile that always anchored me, and whispered, "We've got this." But I couldn't stop scanning the crowd. No sign of Mom. No Sharon with her overdone perfume and forced giggle. No Rachel, my sister, the one who always claimed to be too busy, unless the event revolved around her. Not even my brother Greg, who once promised he'd walk me down the aisle if Dad didn't show. I guess that promise had an expiration date. My maid of honor, Trina, tried to distract me with a nervous wink, but I saw the pity in her eyes. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew. Except maybe me, because some part of me still believed they'd walk in late, laughing, blaming traffic. Or maybe Rachel would storm in dramatically, interrupting the vows, clutching some ridiculous excuse about a flat tire. But nothing happened. The officiant cleared his throat, we exchanged our vows, and I smiled for the camera. My voice was strong, my posture straight. But inside, something fractured. The reception was beautiful. Candlelight, jazz trio, custom cocktails. Marcus twirled me across the floor with tears in his eyes and said I looked like a dream. Our friends gave heartfelt speeches. His parents cried and hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family." And still I couldn't stop the hollow ache in my chest. I hadn't even gotten a call. Not a text. Nothing. Until later that night. Marcus and I had just gotten to the hotel suite. I was halfway out of my gown, exhausted but glowing, when my phone buzzed. Family group chat. I clicked. One photo. Rachel, in a sequined top, holding her tiny white Maltese in a gold paper hat. Balloons in the background. A banner. Poppy turns 6. Mom standing behind her with a smile, holding a glass of wine. Greg sitting on the couch with a party horn in his mouth. Below the picture, a message from Rachel. "Cutest birthday ever, couldn't miss it for the world." That's when I understood. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't been delayed. They had made a choice. They skipped my wedding to throw a birthday party for a dog. And not even a puppy, a 6-year-old dog. I didn't cry. Not that night. Marcus saw the photo and asked, "Do you want to call them?" I shook my head. Because what do you even say to that? Why wasn't I enough? Why did a dog matter more than your own daughter? What did I ever do that made it so easy for you to erase me from the picture? But I didn't ask any of those questions. Instead, I smiled tightly, locked my phone, and climbed into bed next to the only person who had truly shown up for me. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, one thought echoed in my head. They chose a dog over me. And I vowed, right there, in the quiet hush of our wedding suite, that I would never let them make me feel that small again. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a lesson my family would never forget, and it would start with a phone call. From Mom, asking for help. Before you write someone out of your life, you spend years writing yourself out of their story, quietly, slowly, piece by piece. Growing up, I was never the problem child. I was the one who did her homework without being told. I packed my own lunch by the time I was 8. I learned to use the washing machine before I hit double digits, and somehow all that independence turned into invisibility. My sister Rachel, she was a walking sparkler, loud, dramatic, magnetic. If she was in the room, she made sure everyone knew it. She'd scream over nothing, cry over everything, and still manage to be the center of every conversation. She failed a class? The teacher hated her. She screamed at me on Christmas. Olivia, don't provoke her. She scratched my arm so badly it bled. You must have said something. I was the background character to Rachel's main show, and my mother, Sharon, was her producer. Sharon loved drama. She said she hated it, of course, but only while pouring another glass of boxed wine and starting her third story about what Rachel did this time. I used to beg for her attention. I remember one school talent show. I sang a solo. My voice cracked halfway through, but I finished the song. I looked to the crowd, searching for her face, hoping for a smile. She wasn't there. She was at Rachel's junior dance recital across town, an event that started later than mine. I still remember her excuse. I couldn't be in two places at once, Liv. You're so independent, I figured you'd be fine. That was always her reasoning. I was fine. I didn't need the applause. I didn't need the attention. I didn't need anything. Except I did. But when I asked, I became the difficult one. When Dad left, after years of looking at Sharon like she was a burden he couldn't carry anymore, he gave me a long hug and whispered, "Take care of yourself, Olivia. No one else is going to." I was 14. By 15, I had learned to tiptoe, to pick up after everyone, to apologize for things I didn't do. When Rachel stole my allowance and laughed about it, Sharon told me not to create problems. When Greg crashed my bike and blamed it on the neighbor's kid, Sharon told me, "Don't be so accusatory." By the time I graduated high school, I had stopped inviting them to things altogether. But then I met Marcus, and for a while he made me believe I could rewrite the script. He came from a big, affectionate family, the kind that brought extra chairs just in case someone unexpected showed up for dinner. They hugged, they shared, they listened. And he loved me, loudly. He met my family once. That was enough. We had invited them for brunch. Rachel showed up late and spent most of the meal on her phone. Sharon asked Marcus 3 times if he had any other prospects. Later that day, Marcus gently asked, "Are they always like that?" I said yes. He said, "Then why are you still trying so hard?" And I didn't have an answer. But I still invited them to our wedding. I still hoped, maybe foolishly, maybe pathetically, because somewhere deep down, there's still that 10-year-old version of me clutching a half-decorated science fair board, hoping Mom shows up this time. Spoiler, she never did. Instead, she showed up for Rachel's dog's birthday. And not just showed up, she posted about it. Poppy had a custom hat, a 3-tier cake, gift bags for the guests, mostly her friends from work, and a photo backdrop. All while I stood in a wedding dress in front of 50 people, pretending I wasn't looking at my phone between speeches. The moment I saw the photo of the party, I felt something die inside me. Not sadness, no, something sharper, colder, clarity, and with clarity came silence. For 2 whole months, I didn't call, didn't text, didn't respond. I celebrated my new marriage, found joy in small routines with Marcus, and started to breathe a little deeper. Until the phone rang one Thursday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, folding laundry on the counter while waiting for dinner to finish baking. The name Mom lit up the screen. I froze. She never called unless she wanted something. And I already knew, deep down, that this call wasn't about reconciliation. It was about rent. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be fine with it. I still remember the way my hands trembled the day Marcus proposed. We were in Asheville, standing on a cliffside overlook after a long hike. The sun was setting, and the sky looked like it had been painted in strokes of orange and violet. He pulled out the ring, his grandmother's, reset in a new band, and asked me the question that every girl dreams of. And for once, I felt like someone had chosen me, not out of obligation, not as a backup, not because I was easy or quiet or convenient, but because I was loved. I said yes, through tears, through laughter, through years of wondering if I'd ever be enough for anyone. The very next morning, I called my mom. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe happy tears, maybe a squeal of joy, but what I got was a pause, followed by, Marcus? Oh, well, you two moved fast, didn't you? That was it. No congratulations, no questions, no warmth. A few hours later, Rachel texted me a meme about weddings being scams, and then asked, Can I wear white? I have this killer dress I never got to use. I laughed. At first, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. When I told her no, she rolled her eyes over text. Ugh, it's just a color. Don't be that bride. Sharon, of course, sided with her. Let her express herself, Liv. You know she's sensitive about attention. Sensitive about attention? That line would haunt me for weeks. Greg didn't even respond to the news of my engagement. I had to follow up 3 times before he finally said, Cool. That was it. Just cool. Meanwhile, Marcus's family cried. His mom hugged me like I was already part of the clan. His dad cracked open a bottle of vintage wine. They threw us a beautiful engagement dinner. Handmade invitations, a slideshow, fresh flowers. Sharon declined, said Rachel had a hair appointment. Rachel didn't even RSVP. Still, I held out hope. Because deep down, I believed that no matter how checked out my family had been growing up, a wedding was different. Weddings brought people together. So I emailed the save the date. I sent the invitations. I called. I texted. When Rachel said she might be out of town, I adjusted the date so she could make it. When Sharon said she didn't want to fly, I offered to pay for her ticket. When Greg said he was on the fence, I sent him a suit rental voucher with a cheesy note. One less thing to worry about, big brother. I tried. God, I tried. Marcus saw the effort I was putting in and gently asked, would it hurt more if they came out of guilt or didn't come at all? I didn't answer because I didn't know. I just wanted them there. But the days got closer and their responses stayed vague. We'll see. Depends on Rachel's schedule. You know how hectic things are this time of year. A week before the wedding, I still didn't have their travel confirmations. 2 days before, Sharon texted, Don't stress if we can't make it. Rachel's dog is turning 6 this weekend and she's really emotional about it. I'll let you know. No apology, no explanation. Just that Rachel was emotional about her dog. A full-grown Maltese named Poppy, who had her own Instagram and an emotional support vest even though she didn't go anywhere. I read the message 3 times. I showed Marcus. He blinked. This is a joke, right? I wanted it to be, but I knew better. Still, I said nothing. I smiled for my dress fitting. I organized seating charts. I focused on the friends who were coming, the flowers, the playlist. But that ache in my chest? It grew heavier every hour. The night before the wedding, I texted all 3 of them. Let me know if you need directions or help with logistics. Excited to see you tomorrow. No response. That was when I knew. The next day, I walked down the aisle with my neighbor's husband on my arm. He'd stepped in at the last minute like a hero from a small-town sitcom. I held my breath through the vows, through the cheers, through the toasts. And then, hours later, still in my dress, still smelling like peonies and champagne, I checked my phone. The photo. The damn photo. Rachel in her sequined top, Poppy in a birthday hat, Sharon holding a wine glass like she was the mother of the year. Cake, candles, party favors, a whole celebration. For a dog. On my wedding day. They chose a leash over loyalty, a bark over a vow. And that was when the pain started turning into something else entirely. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. And with it, the first flicker of a plan. The silence from my family stretched for weeks after the wedding. No apologies, no explanations. Just the occasional meme or forwarded horoscope in the group chat, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond to any of it. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood I didn't owe them a reply. Instead, I focused on my marriage. Life with Marcus was quiet in the best way. We settled into routines like puzzle pieces snapping into place, shared coffee in the mornings, dancing in the kitchen while dinner simmered, reading side by side before bed. He respected me, not in the superficial, performative way people sometimes mean, but in the real, grounding way. He asked how my day was and actually listened. He remembered the little things, like how I always lit a candle after cleaning or needed total silence while folding towels. He didn't flinch when I woke up crying from dreams I couldn't explain. He just held me. Marcus never tried to fix me. He just made room for all the broken pieces. And for the first time in my life, I felt safe. It was during this time, those first few weeks of marriage, that I started unpacking all the invisible bruises I'd carried from childhood. The way I'd been taught to minimize myself. The way Sharon made me feel like I was a placeholder until Rachel needed attention again. The way Greg pretended to be neutral while always siding with whoever was loudest. Marcus never pushed me to talk, but he was there every time I did. One night, curled up on the couch, I told him everything. How they skipped my piano recital for Rachel's modeling lesson, how Sharon told me not to overreact when Rachel threw my acceptance letter in the trash. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say, "That's awful," or "You need to forgive them." He said something else entirely. "You didn't deserve that." 4 words. And somehow they healed more than all the therapy in the world. We built a life in a cozy rental near the city. Nothing flashy, just ours. He taught me how to grill. I taught him how to fold fitted sheets. We hosted dinners with friends who brought dessert and stayed too late on purpose. And through it all, I didn't hear a word from Sharon. Until month 2. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had just gotten home from work and was unloading groceries when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but then I saw the caller ID, Mom. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, the freezer door still open, a bag of frozen peas in one hand, staring at the screen like it might bite me. Eventually, I answered. "Hello?" Her voice was sweet, too sweet, the kind of sweet that always came before she needed something. "Hi, honey. How's married life?" I didn't say anything, just waited. She hesitated, then let out a dramatic sigh. "So, listen, I hate to even bring this up, but I'm in a bit of a tight spot." There it was. Turns out she was 2 months behind on rent. Rachel had too many expenses to help, and Greg had his own situation. So now, it was my turn. Again. The daughter who got skipped on her wedding day was suddenly the one expected to rescue the matriarch. Sharon said, "You're always so organized. I figured maybe you could lend a hand, just until I catch up." I stared at the counter, at the groceries, at the life I was building, at the picture of Marcus and me from our honeymoon stuck to the fridge with a magnet that said, "You are exactly where you need to be." I swallowed. "Would you have asked me this the day of my wedding?" I asked quietly. She laughed, actually laughed. A little awkward, a little dismissive. "Oh, Liv, don't be dramatic. That was just a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That's what she called skipping the most important day of my life to throw a party for a dog. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles went white. She kept talking, something about eviction notices and how the landlord was being unreasonable. I stopped listening. For the first time in my life, I let her voice fade into background noise. And I made a decision, a quiet, deliberate one. This time I would respond, but not with money, not with forgiveness. This time, I'd speak her language, loud, clear, inevitable, and a little frosted. I ended that call with Sharon without saying yes or no. Just a vague, "I'll think about it." And when I hung up, I stood there for a full 5 minutes, just staring at my phone, trying to process the absurdity of it all. She had skipped my wedding, laughed in a group chat about her dog's birthday, didn't even send a card. And now she wanted rent money? I should have been used to it. Sharon only reached out when she needed something. When Rachel needed help photoshopping college applications, who did they call? Me. When Greg needed a reference for a job he didn't qualify for, me. When Mom couldn't figure out how to file her taxes or unlock her iCloud, me. Always me. Always Olivia. The responsible one. The mature one. The background child who could be leaned on but never celebrated. But that day, something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I didn't even vent to Marcus. I went very, very still, because this time I wasn't just hurt. I was insulted. And something about that insult flipped a switch. They'd erased me from one of the biggest moments of my life, then expected me to be the same Olivia, loyal, dependable, soft-spoken Olivia, when it benefited them. But soft doesn't mean stupid, and kind doesn't mean compliant. That night, I sat on the couch and opened my laptop. I searched for custom bakeries in her area, found one with fast delivery and elegant presentation. Then I designed the cake. Nothing childish, no sprinkles or balloons. This wasn't a petty stunt. This was communication. A single-tier vanilla cake, white fondant, red frosting, one word, denied. Capital letters, serif font, sharp edges. Beneath it, I added a short card to be attached in the delivery box. Sorry I missed the emergency. Hope Poppy had a fun birthday. The woman on the phone at the bakery chuckled when I gave her the message. Spicy, she said. I didn't respond. I just gave the address, paid in full, and waited. The delivery was scheduled for Friday afternoon. By 3:00 p.m., I was glued to my phone, pretending to scroll social media, knowing damn well I was just waiting for it to explode. At 3:41 p.m., the first message came through. Sharon. Olivia, what the hell is this? I didn't reply. At 3:52 p.m. You sent me a cake that says denied? Is this a joke? Still nothing from me. At 4:15 p.m. I don't understand why you're acting like this. Are you okay? I wasn't okay. Not when they skipped my wedding. Not when I saw the picture of a damn dog in a crown where my mother should have been. But now, I was better than okay. Because I was done. By 5 p.m., the group chat lit up. Rachel. Seriously? You're going full psycho now? It was a dog. You're married. Get over it. Honestly, this proves you've always been bitter. That was when I broke my silence. One message. One time. Me. No. This proves I finally learned how to treat people the way they treat me. Silence. Not a single reply. I set my phone down and went for a walk. The air was cool and sharp, the kind that wakes you up. I felt free. Not vindictive. Not childish. Just done. When I got back, Marcus was in the kitchen cooking dinner. He looked up. You okay? I kissed his cheek. I am now. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't carrying dead weight anymore. No more silent begging. No more tiptoeing. No more hoping they'd see me, finally, as something other than their emotional ATM. They could call it petty. They could call it cruel. I called it closure. Because the message wasn't just for Sharon. It was for every time I swallowed a scream growing up. For every missed recital. For every gaslighted moment. For every time I was told to just be grateful. This time, I wasn't grateful. I was done. It's strange, the calm that follows a decision like that. Once I sent the cake, there was no panic, no second guessing, no guilt gnawing at my conscience like it used to. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because I'd gotten revenge, that wasn't the point. It was because I finally said no. For most of my life, I had been trained to accommodate, to compromise, to absorb pain quietly and turn the other cheek. I didn't know how to say, "You hurt me," without someone calling me dramatic. So I stopped trying. Until now. The cake wasn't an outburst. It was a declaration. It wasn't for them. It was for me. And after that, things shifted. The next morning, I brewed coffee in silence while Marcus scrolled the news. He glanced up and grinned. "You seem lighter." I was. I didn't explain what I'd done, not right away, but a few days later, I handed him my phone and let him read the texts. He read everything, from Sharon's angry messages to Rachel's outbursts. When he got to my final reply, "This proves I finally learned how to treat people the way they treat me," he looked up and said, "That's the Olivia I married." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "You don't think it was too much?" He shook his head. "No, I think it was honest and overdue." I hadn't realized how long I'd been starving for that kind of validation. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop again. Not for another cake, this time for documentation. Screenshots, dates, messages. I backed everything up, labeled each folder. It wasn't about being paranoid. It was about being prepared. Because when you grow up in a family like mine, you learn that they don't process confrontation. They rewrite it. In a few weeks, I knew the story would change. I'd become the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the unstable one. But not this time. This time the receipts were ready, and I wasn't afraid of their spin. A week passed, then another. No one called. Not Sharon, not Rachel, not Greg. It was blissful. Marcus and I spent a weekend in the mountains. We unplugged, hiked, cooked together, and for the first time since the wedding, I didn't check my phone compulsively. On Sunday night, as we were packing to leave, I got a text from my cousin Lena. "Lena, I heard what happened. I just want to say, you were right to do what you did." My heart clenched. Lena had always been quiet, always neutral. She was the only cousin who sent a card after the wedding, and even that had seemed like a silent apology for the rest of the family. I replied, "Thanks, I honestly wasn't sure if I went too far." Her response, "You didn't go far enough." I sat with that message for a long time, because she was right. The cake was the beginning, not the end. There were still things I hadn't said, still truths I hadn't voiced. I had spent so long walking on eggshells, trying to preserve ties that were frayed and one-sided. But I was done performing gratitude for people who didn't earn it. So I wrote a letter. Not for them, for me. It was a letter I never planned to send. I poured everything into it. The time Rachel faked a panic attack to get out of my graduation. The way Greg stole my college fund and Sharon called it a family emergency. The way they'd tell people I was so cold, never mentioning the years they gave me the silent treatment because I asked for space. I wrote until my hands cramped, until the words bled dry. Then I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. A physical reminder. I said it, even if they never heard it. I also started therapy again, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to stay whole. My therapist, Dana, listened carefully. Then she smiled and said, "That wasn't petty, that was a boundary." And suddenly, everything made sense. They'd crossed so many lines for so many years that when I finally built one, made of sugar and flour, they called it an attack. But boundaries look like betrayal to those who benefit from you having none. And now, I was done offering discounts on my dignity. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. And they were about to find out what life looks like when the background girl stops clapping and walks off stage. The next few days unfolded exactly as I knew they would. Sharon didn't call me. Of course not. That would have required confronting the situation directly. Instead, She took to what she does best, playing the victim. She started with the group chat. Mom, I can't believe you'd humiliate me like that. What did I ever do to deserve this? What did she ever do? Where should I start? When she skipped my birthday 3 years in a row. When she told me I was selfish for applying to out-of-state colleges because Rachel would miss me too much. Or when she called Marcus my safety net after we got engaged. But of course, she didn't mention any of that. Mom, you've always been distant. I tried to be there for you. You just don't let people love you. That one made me laugh, out loud. I showed Marcus, and he just raised an eyebrow. Projection much? Then came Rachel, louder, meaner, and as expected, completely lacking self-awareness. Rachel, seriously, Olivia? You sent her a cake that says, denied? That's psychotic. All this over a wedding you rushed because you were desperate to get married before 35? That one stung for a second. Then it fizzled. Because there was a time when Rachel's words could bruise, when I let her define my worth because she said things so confidently, like facts written in stone. But not anymore. Me, in the group chat. This isn't about the cake, it's about the choices you all made, and the fact that you thought I'd just swallow it like always. Rachel, so you're punishing us? You think you're better than us now because you're married? I didn't reply. Because what could I say that would matter to people who heard only what they wanted to hear? I didn't need to explain my silence. My silence was the explanation. Later that evening, I received a string of private texts from Greg. Now, Greg rarely said much. He liked to stay neutral, too afraid to lose favor with either side. But this time, he slipped. Greg, look, I get why you're upset, but maybe don't burn bridges. You'll regret it someday. I stared at that one for a long time. Regret? I had spent years regretting every time I stayed quiet, every time I smiled through being dismissed, every time I gave, and still wasn't invited to the table. If anything, not burning the bridge had been the mistake. So I replied, Me. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped rebuilding it every time you blew it up. No reply. Of course. But the silence didn't hurt this time. I sat on the couch beside Marcus that night, glass of wine in hand, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel a single knot in my stomach. No buzzing anxiety, no fear of what they'd say next. Because the worst had already happened, and I had survived it. Not just survived it, transformed from it. A few days later, Marcus's mother, Darlene, called. She had heard from a mutual acquaintance what happened at the wedding. Apparently, Sharon had been talking, and not kindly. Darlene, bless her, was the kind of woman who didn't mince words. She said, Olivia, I don't care what your mother says. That was one of the most beautiful weddings I've ever been to, and I just want you to know, our door is always open. You're not missing anything over there. You've got a new family now. I thanked her, tears springing to my eyes. It was surreal, being comforted by a woman who owed me nothing, who loved me simply because I was good to her son. And in that moment, I realized something. Family isn't blood. It's not who shows up for the easy moments. It's who stays when things are hard. It's who claps when you rise and holds you when you fall. And Sharon, Rachel, Greg, they had their chance. I wasn't the same girl begging for crumbs anymore. I was the woman who mailed a cake instead of a check, who said no without guilt, who finally saw her own worth and chose to protect it. Let them twist the story. Let them call me bitter or dramatic. I'd rather be called difficult than be everyone's doormat. And deep down, I knew. This wasn't the end of it. People like Sharon don't like losing control. And she hadn't called in defeat yet, which meant the next message would come, with a price tag. It didn't take long for Sharon to escalate things. By the end of the week, the messages slowed down. But then something else started happening. I began getting texts from extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousin Beth from Missouri, Uncle Ron, who hadn't called me since I was in high school, even Aunt Jean, who once told me I was too serious for a little girl. Every single one of them had a version of the same line. What happened between you and your mom? She's devastated. It's never too late to talk things out. Sharon had activated the family sympathy machine. She'd framed it like I had lost my mind, that I'd sent her an aggressive, threatening cake, that I was holding a grudge over a dog party, and she just didn't know what went wrong with me. And the worst part? They believed her. Because Sharon had always known how to spin a story, how to make herself look like the weary, heartbroken mother just trying to keep the family together, while painting me as cold, detached, too sensitive. I ignored most of them. But one message, just one, got under my skin. It was from Aunt Carol. Carol, your mom cried when she told me. She said you've always had this wall around you. I just hope you can find it in your heart to be kinder. Kinder. That word hit me like a slap. I'd been kind all my life. Too kind. So kind it nearly broke me. Kind when Rachel called me fat in front of her friends. Kind when Sharon let Greg take my car without asking. Kind when they forgot my birthday. Kind when they stole my voice and told me to be grateful for the echo. And now, when I finally said no, I was the cruel one. That night, I sat at the dining table staring at my phone until Marcus brought me tea. You okay? He asked. I handed him the phone, let him read the message. He nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. You've spent your whole life being polite about being hurt. You finally got impolite, and now they're uncomfortable. That's not your burden to carry. And he was right. I wasn't being cruel. I was setting a boundary for the first time. And boundaries, to people who benefit from you having none, feel like betrayal. I decided to respond to Carol. Just once. Me. I have always been kind. What I haven't always been is honest. And I'm done pretending my family didn't hurt me just because it makes people like you more comfortable. Read. No reply. I figured that would be the end of it. But then something unexpected happened. A message popped up from my cousin Lena again. Lena. They're lying, Olivia. I was there the night of the dog party. I blinked, sat up straighter. Lena. They knew it was your wedding day. Rachel made a toast to celebrating what actually matters. Everyone laughed, your mom included. I didn't know what shocked me more, the fact that they toasted against my wedding, or that someone was finally telling me the truth. Lena continued. I didn't laugh. I felt sick. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to start something, but I should have. I'm sorry. I took a deep breath. Me. Thank you for telling me. That means more than you know. Then she wrote, You weren't crazy for sending that cake. Honestly, you should have sent two. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. It felt like someone had cracked a window in a suffocating room. There it was again. Confirmation. Clarity. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't imagined the disrespect. They had toasted to my irrelevance. They had erased me on purpose. And now that I refused to stay invisible, they were scrambling to repaint the narrative. But I wasn't playing along anymore. I was done performing the role of understanding daughter. No more gentle nods. No more, it's fine. It wasn't fine. And I wasn't going back. A few days later, Sharon called again. I let it ring. Then she texted, I didn't mean to hurt you, but Rachel was in a really fragile place that weekend. She needed support. I assumed you'd understand. I stared at the screen dumbfounded. So not only was it a dog's birthday party, they were claiming it was emotional support for Rachel. I didn't reply, but I copied the message, filed it in the delusions folder on my phone. For once, I wasn't interested in defending myself, because the truth had already revealed itself, and my silence was starting to feel louder than their excuses. Just when I thought the dust was finally settling, the universe threw one more surprise my way. And not just any surprise, one that made every suppressed emotion surge to the surface. It started with a Facebook message from someone I hadn't seen in years. Ben Holloway, Rachel's boyfriend. Or rather, ex-boyfriend, as it turned out. Ben and Rachel had been together on and off for over 5 years. Their relationship was a whirlwind of drama, passionate vacations, screaming matches in parking lots, makeup photo shoots. The kind of exhausting dynamic that always somehow landed on Rachel's terms. The message was short. "Hey Olivia, I owe you an apology. You got a minute?" I stared at the screen, confused, curious. I wrote back cautiously. "Sure, what's this about?" Within minutes he replied. "Ben, I was supposed to be at your wedding. Rachel told me it was canceled." My stomach twisted. Me. What? Ben. "She said you and Marcus had a fight and postponed it. She didn't want me to waste a weekend flying in for something that wasn't happening." I went cold. Ben had always lived a few states away. He was invited. He RSVP'd. We even sent him a +1 option. And Rachel lied. Ben. I believed her, until a week later when I saw the photos on a mutual friend's page. You looked happy, real happy. And then I found out about the dog party. I didn't reply. I didn't even breathe. Then he sent the kicker. Ben. I broke up with her that night. I couldn't believe how casually she dismissed your wedding. And when I asked her why, she said, and I quote, "Olivia's always had this victim complex. Let her cry into her bouquet." I felt something in my chest collapse and reform all at once, a heartbreak that twisted into hard-earned clarity. He continued, "Ben, I should have reached out sooner, but I just want you to know, I didn't skip your wedding. I was lied to, and I'm sorry." I thanked him, not just for the message, but for confirming what I always suspected. It hadn't been a misunderstanding, or poor timing. It had been deliberate, malicious. Rachel hadn't just wanted attention. She wanted mine taken away. She didn't want to miss my wedding. She wanted to erase it. And Sharon? She went along with it. Of course she did. In that moment, every polite justification I had ever made for them, every, "maybe she didn't mean it," or "maybe Rachel's just insecure," died a permanent death. Because this wasn't a slip-up. This was a sabotage. And it wasn't enough that they wanted to be the center of attention. They wanted to make sure I was nowhere near the center. Later that evening, I sat across from Marcus at dinner and told him everything Ben said. He didn't react immediately. He just put his fork down, sat back in his chair, and said, "That's sick." And then, "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Not hurt, exactly," I said. "Just done. Finally. Fully done." And I meant it. I didn't want to fix it. I didn't want to confront her. I didn't want an apology. I wanted distance. Distance so permanent it couldn't be crossed by any number of crocodile tears or performative regrets. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. "You know," he said gently, "you don't owe anyone the version of you that tolerated that kind of cruelty." And that was the moment I knew I was free. The weight of needing them to explain, to validate, to acknowledge, they didn't matter anymore. Because I had proof. Of everything. Proof of the lies. Proof of the intention. Proof of the pattern. I didn't need closure from them. I already had it. But apparently, Sharon hadn't gotten the message. Because 2 weeks later, she called again. And this time, she didn't just want help. She wanted rescue. "Hi, Liv," she said, voice low and pinched. I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't serious. I didn't say anything, just listened. "I'm about to be evicted," she continued. "Rachel said she's trying to get the money together, but you know how things are for her right now." Ah, yes. The jobless princess who threw her own sister under the bus was apparently too overwhelmed to help her enabler. So, Sharon added, clearing her throat, I was wondering if you could float me 2 months' rent, just to keep me afloat. There it was again, that desperate voice, the same one that always came right after an act of betrayal, expecting me to be the lifeline. Only this time, I wasn't sinking with her. I didn't send another cake. I didn't scream. I didn't play nice. I simply opened my laptop, typed a short, cold email, and hit send. Subject line: Final response. Ms. Hart no longer accepts emotional invoices disguised as emergencies. Please do not contact me again unless it's through a licensed mediator. No salutation, no signature, no guilt. Because sometimes the most savage thing you can do is not lift a single finger. It's strange how peace doesn't always arrive like a sunrise, warm and beautiful and slow. Sometimes it walks in silently, unannounced, and takes a seat next to you while you're doing something ordinary, like making tea or folding a towel. That's how it happened for me. After I sent that final email, something in me shifted for good. No more checking my phone in dread. No more wondering what version of me they were passing around at the next family gathering. No more rehearsing arguments I'd never win against people who never listened. I was free. Not the kind of freedom you get when you run away. The kind you earn when you finally stop chasing what won't love you back. And that's what I'd been doing my whole life. Chasing, proving, pleasing, performing. For a woman who raised me like a ghost in my own home. For a sister who fed off spotlight and made sure I stayed in the shadows. For a brother who called himself neutral but never once stood up for me. That chapter was closed. And in its place, something new was beginning. Marcus and I started building the kind of life that didn't revolve around crisis or repair. We bought a small house with a garden in the back. Nothing flashy, just ours. Every Saturday, we'd go to the farmer's market. Every Sunday, we'd make pancakes and sit on the porch with coffee, talking about everything and nothing. I started painting again. I hadn't touched a brush in over a decade. Sharon once told me I wasn't really creative, and for years I believed her. But now, in the quiet of my own space, I let color pour out of me. Big, messy strokes, soft gradients, scenes I never let myself imagine. It didn't have to be good. It just had to be mine. I also started writing again, mostly letters I'd never send. To Sharon, to Rachel, to the version of me who used to think crumbs were a banquet. Each letter I folded and tucked away. It was never about confrontation. It was about reclaiming the parts of me they tried to shame into silence. One day Marcus surprised me with a dinner celebration, just us and a few close friends. He made a toast. To the bravest woman I know, not because she fights back, but because she finally stopped fighting for what was never hers to begin with. I cried. The good kind. The kind that doesn't sting, just releases. And as our friends raised their glasses, I looked around and realized something I never thought I'd say. I didn't miss them, not even a little. Because the people who matter most were already here, not blood, not obligation, but people who chose me, without conditions. And one of them was my cousin Lena. She came to visit a few weeks after Sharon's final plea. We sat on the porch, drinking lemonade like kids, and I asked her something I hadn't dared before. Did they ever say anything? About the wedding? About me? Lena looked at me, then nodded. They said you'd regret cutting us all off, that you were acting out. I raised an eyebrow. And what did you say? She smiled. I said maybe you were finally acting right. We laughed, and just like that, the guilt dissolved further. Because every story has two endings, the one they write for you and the one you choose for yourself, and I was finally choosing mine. A life without apology, a love without earning, a self that didn't shrink to keep the peace. That night, I lit a candle, played my favorite old record, and danced barefoot across the living room floor. Not for Marcus, not for an audience, just for me. Because the thing about being called a disappointment your whole life is that eventually you stop trying to impress people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You start impressing yourself. And the woman I was now, bold, quiet, strong, she didn't need validation. She had her own, etched in every boundary, baked into every decision, written into every step away from the people who thought they owned her story. They had their chance. I gave them years. Now, I was giving myself everything they never could. Peace, clarity, and finally, a future untouched by their noise. It had been nearly 3 months since the cake, 2 months since the final email, and 6 long weeks of complete silence, until a knock came at my door. It was a Friday afternoon. Marcus was still at work. I was in the kitchen prepping a lemon roast, humming softly to the radio when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Not a delivery, not a neighbor. When I opened the door, I didn't even feel shocked. There she was, Sharon. Her makeup was smudged, hair tied back in a tight bun like she'd been trying to appear put together, but had clearly cried in the car. She held a store-bought pie in trembling hands, and for the first time in my adult life, she looked small. "Hi, Liv," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her the way you look at someone you used to love but no longer trust, like an artifact from a life you've left behind. I just want to talk," she said, forcing a smile and glancing over my shoulder. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, not because I owed her that grace, but because I wanted to hear what she had to say with my own 2 ears. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands nervously smoothing her slacks. "I know I've made mistakes," she began, eyes darting like she was rehearsing lines. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I just—" She exhaled sharply. "I never realized how much you resented me." That made me blink. Resentment? She was framing this as my issue again, my flaw, my internalized anger. I kept my voice calm. "You didn't realize skipping my wedding might be hurtful." She looked down. "Rachel was in a bad place, Liv. She'd just lost that modeling gig and was spiraling. I thought—" "You thought comforting Rachel was more important than attending your daughter's wedding." Silence. I leaned forward, keeping my tone even. "I need you to hear something. I didn't stop speaking to you because of the dog. I stopped because of what the dog represented. Every skipped milestone. Every time you treated me like an afterthought. Every time I gave and you called me difficult when I finally asked for something back." She looked like she wanted to interrupt. I didn't let her. "This isn't about one day. It's about a lifetime." She finally looked up, and her eyes were wet. "You've changed," she said softly. "I've healed," I corrected. "That probably looks the same to you." She reached for the pie, sliding it across the coffee table like a peace offering. "I thought maybe you and Marcus could come to dinner sometime. Maybe we could start over?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm not looking to start over. I'm looking to move forward." She blinked. "Isn't that the same thing?" "No," I said. "Starting over would mean pretending nothing happened. Moving forward means acknowledging what did, and adjusting my expectations accordingly." She looked at the floor. "Do you hate me?" she whispered. And for the first time in my life, I could answer truthfully and without hesitation. "No, I don't hate you. I just don't trust you." And maybe that was even more painful for her to hear, because Sharon had always relied on the unspoken agreement that I would eventually cave, that I'd bend for the sake of family, that I'd show up with casseroles and checkbooks and apologies. But I wasn't that Olivia anymore. She sat in silence for a long moment. Then, quietly, she stood. "I guess I'll go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I walked her to the door. She turned one last time. Do I have any chance at being part of your life again? I looked her in the eyes. You have a chance to be accountable. What you do with that is up to you. She nodded once. Goodbye, Olivia. And for the first time, she didn't call me Liv. After the door closed, I stood there for a while, listening to the quiet. The roast still baking, the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Peace, uninterrupted. I didn't cry, I didn't collapse, because nothing about her visit changed the truth. She hadn't come to make it right. She'd come to make it comfortable. And I was finally okay with being uncomfortable if it meant I didn't have to betray myself again. That night, I told Marcus everything. He nodded, pulled me close, and said, I'm proud of you. And I was proud of me too. Because the old me would have seen the pie as an olive branch. This me saw it for what it was, a placeholder for an apology that never came. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with silence, with a door that stays shut, with a woman who no longer needs anyone's permission to be whole. After Sharon's visit, I kept waiting for the emotional crash. The part where I'd cave in guilt, wonder if I was being too harsh, or replay our conversation 100 different ways, looking for a kinder ending. But that never came. What came instead was clarity, and a kind of peace I didn't know was possible. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from her. Not a text, not a call, not a follow-up. And for once, her silence didn't sting. It confirmed everything. Because if her apology had been real, she would have followed through. But people like Sharon don't apologize. They perform regret like a scene in a play. And when the audience doesn't clap, they exit stage left. I was finally okay with the show ending. I stopped checking the family group chat, stopped wondering who was siding with who, stopped needing to defend my version of the story. Because I wasn't just a character in their narrative anymore. I had become the author of my own. One afternoon, I sat at my desk with a cup of tea and opened my journal. I flipped through the pages of anger, grief, disbelief, and found myself at the last entry. They skipped my wedding. I skipped the guilt. And below it, in bold letters, I wrote, denied. Not out of spite, but out of survival. That word, once cold and sharp, had become sacred, because saying no had saved me. No to emotional manipulation, no to forced family roles, no to being the unpaid therapist, the unpaid bank, the unpaid daughter. It wasn't bitterness, it was boundaries. And if they mistook that for cruelty, that was their burden, not mine. Marcus and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary quietly, just us. We didn't throw a party or post online. Instead, we made dinner together, then slow danced in the living room to a playlist he made when we first started dating. He whispered, "This is what love looks like." And I finally believed it. Not the version I'd grown up with, transactional, conditional, always fragile, but steady, rooted, intentional love. I looked around our home, my paintings on the wall, my books on the shelves, my laughter echoing in corners that used to hold silence. This was mine, not borrowed, not begged for, built, earned, chosen. One morning, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, handwritten envelope. Inside, a folded note with no salutation. It read, "You've made your point, but you're still my daughter." That was it. No signature. No love, Mom. No ownership. Just a sentence that echoed like a door creaking on its last hinge. I didn't reply. Because she was wrong. I wasn't hers anymore. I was mine. And I had made more than a point. I had made a choice. To stop showing up for people who only missed me when they needed something. To stop begging for table scraps from people who gorged themselves on my silence. To stop confusing proximity with love. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Fully. Finally. Fiercely. And when I say done, I don't mean I closed the door with bitterness. I mean I built a new one and locked it from the inside. Sometimes I think about that cake. One word, 8 letters, frosted in red like a stamp of truth. Denied. It wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was the most honest thing I'd ever sent. And it changed everything. Because it taught me that love without respect is just manipulation wrapped in sentiment. That family isn't sacred when it's abusive. And that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is not forgive. Not until the person is truly sorry. Not until they change. Not until they earn it. And if they never do, you don't owe them a damn thing. I look in the mirror now and see a woman who doesn't flinch at her reflection. She isn't trying to prove her worth. She knows it. And to the version of me who once sat alone on her wedding night, phone in hand, wondering why no one came. You didn't lose a family. You finally saw them for who they were. And that moment, that painful, hollow moment, was the beginning of your freedom. So here's to the women who were always too polite, too soft, too willing. May we all learn to say, no, not anymore. Never again. They skipped my wedding. I sent them a cake. One word, denied. And finally, I was free.